Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my channel? Thank you so much. I never thought my marriage would end over a dog, but there we were. Me, standing in the kitchen still in my pajamas, trying to hold back tears while Bryce, my husband of 10 years, zipped up a suitcase like he was heading out for a business trip. Only this time, he wasn't coming back. He looked at me with cold, flat eyes and said, "I'm taking Zeus. You get the kid." No goodbye, no discussion, just that. Zeus is our golden retriever. We got him before our son Eli was born. He's practically part of the family. He slept at the foot of our bed, chased Eli around the yard, even rescued socks from the laundry basket like it was his job. And Bryce just claimed him like a piece of luggage. I remember standing there frozen. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but then she chimed in. Joan, his mother, always lurking just close enough to comment but never far enough to be helpful. She was standing by the door, fake pearls around her neck and an actual smirk on her face. Well, she chuckled, at least the dogs trained. They laughed like my son was some broken toy I now had to keep while they got to walk off with the prize. Like being a mother full-time in the middle of a divorce was the losing hand. I felt like the oxygen had been pulled out of the room, but I didn't say anything then. I didn't scream. I didn't cry in front of them. I just turned and picked up Eli's drawing off the counter, one he made of the three of us holding hands under a giant sun, and walked straight past them because he was in the next room. Eli, 9 years old, sitting cross-legged on the carpet, headphones in, coloring. He didn't see the storm breaking apart around him. Not yet. And in that moment, I made a promise to myself. He will never think he was the problem. Let Bryce take the dog. Let Joan think she won. I'd take the kid. I wanted the kid. And I was going to protect him from everything, especially from the people who laughed at his pain. But that's not the part one came here to tell you. The part you need to hear is what happened a few weeks later on court day. That's when my son, my sweet, quiet, observant Eli, walked up to the judge, cleared his throat, and asked, "Mom, can I read what Dad texted me last night?" The whole courtroom went dead silent. The judge raised his eyebrow. Bryce's lawyer's face went completely pale. Joan, sitting behind us in a navy blue blazer and smug expression, looked like she'd swallowed her own tongue. And in that moment, right there in front of everyone, Eli held something more powerful than any lawyer ever could, the truth. He was just 9, but he knew. And for the first time, the adults in that room had no choice but to listen. But let me take you back to the beginning so you understand why that moment changed everything. Because it wasn't just one bad fight. It wasn't one toxic comment. It was years of quiet eraser gaslighting, Bryce making me feel like I was always overreacting, always too emotional, always the one ruining everything. It was sub. When Eli cried after Bryce yelled, it was my fault for not teaching him to toughen up. When I asked for help, I was nagging. When I finally said I wanted out, he told people I was unstable, that he was just trying to hold the family together. And people believed him. They always did because he's charming, good with words, has a great smile, the kind of guy who calls waitresses sweetheart and gets away with it. But Eli saw things no one else did. He saw how his dad's face changed the second we were behind closed doors. He saw how I'd stop mid-sentence when Bryce walked into the room. He noticed that I never laughed anymore. Not really. And when Bryce took the dog and walked out of our lives like we were leftovers, Eli didn't cry. He just sat next to me that night, holding Zeus's old collar, and said, "I don't think Dad likes us very much." That was the beginning of the end and unknowingly the start of the truth finally coming to light. When people picture a single mom going through a custody battle, they often imagine chaos, screaming, slamming doors, cops being called. But that's not how mine started. Mine began in silence. It was the silence after my husband Bryce left with our dog and a smirk. The kind of silence that follows a tornado. Not noisy, just empty. Every drawer he cleared, every coat he took off the hook, it all echoed through the house like a whisper saying he's gone. At first, Eli didn't ask many questions. He just kept drawing, sketching superheroes, sunsets, and sometimes pictures of our dog Zeus with a cape. I pretended everything was fine. I overcompensated, homemade lunches with handwritten notes, extra bedtime stories. I let him fall asleep in my bed most nights because he was afraid of the dark again. He hadn't been since kindergarten. Our little 2-bedroom apartment wasn't fancy, but it was ours. I had painted Eli's room light blue and strung little star-shaped lights around the ceiling. He liked it when the stars watched over him. I worked from home as a freelance designer, taking on odd jobs while Eli was at school. It paid the bills barely, but it gave me time with him, and I wasn't about to give that up for anything. The mornings were the hardest. That's when I noticed how much things had changed. I'd wake up and find Eli already dressed, sitting quietly at the table, staring at the cereal box but not eating. He used to bounce around in the morning, asking 100 questions about dinosaurs in space and how many teeth sharks really have. Now he was just still. I knew he was hurting and I didn't know how to fix it. When Bryce and I first met, he was magnetic, confident, charming, ambitious. He made me feel zen in a way I hadn't felt in years. I was 23, working at a print shop. He came in to get business cards and left with my number. Within a year, we were married. By the time Eli was born, I had already started making excuses for him. At first, it was little things. He'd forget to pick me up after work, or he'd joke about me letting myself go right after I gave birth. He called it banter. I called it a bad day. But those bad days turned into a pattern. He controlled the money, the thermostat, the way I parented. When Eli got a cold, Bryce accused me of letting him get soft by letting him rest. When Eli got scared after a nightmare, Bryce told him, "Boys don't cry." That's when I started sleeping with the baby monitor on, even when Eli was 6. Not to hear Eli, he didn't cry out anymore, but to hear Bryce. People didn't see that side of him. They saw the Bryce who hosted backyard barbecues and gave funny toasts. Joan, his mother especially, thought Bryce walked on water. She once told me, "You're lucky he puts up with your moods." And I remember staring at her, wondering how many other women had been silenced with that same sentence. I was exhausted, not just from parenting but from pretending. Pretending we were a happy family. Pretending I wasn't shrinking inside my own home. Pretending Eli was okay. The final straw wasn't dramatic. No cheating scandal. No screaming match. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Bryce came home late, tossed his keys on the counter, and asked if Eli had finished his spelling homework. I said yes. He said, "Good, because I don't want him ending up like you, barely scraping by." He said it casually, like he was talking about the weather, and then he walked into the next room to check his emails. That night, I waited until he was asleep. I got up, walked to the bathroom, locked the door, and cried on the floor. Not because I was sad, but because I finally knew I was done. It took 3 more weeks for him to leave. And when he didn't pack up quietly. He took Zeus, his dignity, and any sense of decency he had left and told me I got the kid. That phrase kept replaying in my mind, "You get the kid." Like Eli was some unwanted item in a divorce auction. But the truth is, I wanted the kid because he was kind, empathetic, and smart. He saw people in ways adults couldn't. And if Bryce couldn't see the value in that, then Eli didn't need him. I didn't know then how much Eli had noticed. I didn't know how much he'd been holding in. But I'd find out soon, and so would the judge. The first custody meeting was in a sterile office downtown. Beige walls, leather chairs, a fake fern in the corner designed to feel neutral. It didn't. Bryce walked in 10 minutes late, wearing a blazer and smiling like he was the one getting interviewed. Joan trailed behind him, uninvited, but smugly planted herself in the waiting area with a Tupperware of homemade banana bread she offered to the receptionist, like we were all one big happy family. I sat across from Bryce and watched him perform, polite, calm, the concerned father. He talked about routine, stability, and his deep commitment to Eli's well-being. Every word made my skin crawl because I knew who he really was behind closed doors. We wanted shared custody, week on, week off. I was stunned. This man hadn't called Eli. I once, since he left, not a single FaceTime, not even a text. When he came to pick up his mail, he stood outside like a stranger and never asked how Eli was doing. And now he wanted half of Eli's life handed back to him like a pizza order. I tried to stay composed, but the words rushed out. He doesn't even check on his son. He doesn't show up. Why does he get half? Bryce leaned back and smiled. Because I'm his father. That's when I realized this wasn't about Eli. This was about control, about winning, about image. And Bryce wasn't doing it alone. Joan started inserting herself into everything. She'd email me passive-aggressively, just checking in to make sure Eli's eating enough greens. He's looking a little puffy in that school photo. Then there were the school drop-offs. Bryce would suddenly appear unannounced, wearing his #1 dad hoodie, waving to the other parents, handing Eli granola bars like he was the provider of the year. And Eli, he looked confused, uncomfortable. He stopped smiling in the mornings. At home, I noticed a shift. Eli had more questions now, harder ones. Why does Dad say you don't want me to see him? Did you tell him I'm scared of his house? Is it bad to cry when I miss Zeus? That one gutted me. He missed the dog so badly he'd started drawing Zeus into family photos. Except now, Zeus was always standing between me and Eli, almost like a protector. One night, Eli came to me and whispered, "Dad told me not to tell you, but he says you cry too much and I'll be messed up if I live with you all the time." I sat down on the floor in the hallway and just held him. I didn't cry. I wanted to, but I couldn't afford to give Bryce that satisfaction. Instead, I documented everything. I kept a journal, saved screenshots of every manipulative message. I made copies of the few emails Joan slipped up and sent directly, things like, "If Eli doesn't learn discipline, he'll end up like your side of the family." Meanwhile, Bryce was getting bolder. He started sending Eli texts like, "Your mom says no again. Surprise." Or, "Wish I could see you more, but your mom wants to keep you away." It was textbook alienation. But trying to explain that to a judge felt like trying to prove a ghost existed. My lawyer, Denise, was careful but honest. She said, "Unless there's abuse or something solid on paper, judges like balance. They won't favor one parent without evidence." Evidence. That word haunted me because most of the damage Bryce did wasn't through bruises or threats. It was through tone, through lies passed like candy through erosion. Eli was being eroded. Still, the court date was set. I had 2 weeks to prepare. I spent every night going through our text chains, organizing dates and entries, building the quietest case of my life. Then one night, I went to check on Eli and found him sitting up in bed, his face pale, holding his tablet. "Mom," he asked, his voice small, "I don't think Dad meant for me to see this." He handed me the screen. I scrolled through the messages, my stomach twisted with every word. There it was in black and white. Bryce texting someone, his new girlfriend maybe, ranting about how Eli was soft, how he'd get him fixed once he got more custody. And the worst one, "Can't wait to be done with that brat so I can get my real life back." Eli looked at me, eyes glassy, and asked, "Is it my fault he doesn't want me?" I felt my entire body go cold. "No," I said. "No, baby, you didn't do anything wrong. You're perfect. Your dad is the one who's broken." That night, I knew we had our evidence, not just for the judge but for Eli. He deserved to be heard, and soon he would be. The night Eli showed me those texts from Bryce, something inside me shifted. Up until that moment, I'd been fighting to survive the storm. But now I wasn't just reacting, I was ready to fight back. I sat on Eli's bed, holding the tablet, reading the words over and over. "Can't wait to be done with that brat so I can get my real life back. He cries like a baby, just like his mom. Useless." He had sent them to Eli by mistake, meant for someone else. Maybe the woman he'd been seeing or one of his buddies he shared his poor single dad sob stories with. But now it was too late. Eli saw it, and so did I. I took a breath and looked at my son. His face was pale and still, like he was trying to disappear into his blanket. He didn't want comfort, he wanted truth. "Did you read all of it?" I asked. He nodded. I didn't want to, but I couldn't stop. I thought maybe I was bad. "No," I said immediately. "You are not bad, Eli. He's wrong. He's so wrong." And I meant it, every word. This wasn't just about getting custody anymore. This was about breaking a cycle, making sure Eli didn't grow up thinking love was something you had to earn by being quiet, by pleasing people who didn't deserve you. So I printed the screenshots, labeled them by date, and backed them up on a flash drive. I contacted Denise, my lawyer, first thing the next morning. Her voice tightened as I read her some of the messages. "This is big," she said. "This could swing everything. But are you sure you want Eli to speak?" That stopped me cold. I hadn't even considered putting him on the stand. The idea made my stomach twist. He was just 9. I didn't want him tangled in courtroom drama, questioned by cold-faced attorneys, or forced to stare his dad in the eye and relive all this. But then I remembered something he said after Bryce left. "You always tell me to speak up when something's not right. Is this one of those times?" He wanted to speak. That was the difference. So I sat him down at the kitchen table with some juice and graham crackers and asked gently, "Eli, you don't have to, but if you want to talk to the judge, if you want to tell him how you feel, I'll be right there the whole time." He looked at me, serious beyond his years, and said, "Can I show him what Dad wrote? The judge needs to know the truth, right?" I blinked back tears. "Yes, baby, he does." The next few days were Denise arranged for the evidence to be officially submitted. We created a timeline of events, built a narrative, and filed for a formal statement from Eli to be reviewed by the court beforehand. Meanwhile, Joan started showing up at Eli's school again. Once she tried to hand him a gift during dismissal, some action figure and a little card that read, "Daddy's just fighting for you." Eli gave it to me and asked, "Why does it feel like a trap?" Because it was. I reported it. Denise filed a complaint. Bryce, as usual, texted me that I was using Eli against him. that I was weaponizing a child. Classic projection. But I didn't take the bait. Instead, I kept Eli close. We talked every night, not about the court, but about how he felt, what scared him, what made him strong. He asked questions and I answered with honesty. No sugarcoating, no false promises. The night before the hearing, Eli couldn't sleep. He lay beside me, quiet in the dark, and whispered, "What if the judge doesn't believe me?" I turned to him, brushed his hair back, and said, "The truth doesn't need to be loud to be real. Just speak from your heart. That's all you need to do." He didn't say anything after that, but he reached for my hand and held it tightly. The next morning, we got dressed quietly. I put on a navy dress and simple earrings. Eli wore his school uniform, freshly ironed, with his favorite red sneakers. He said they made him brave. Outside the courthouse, Denise met us with her briefcase and a solemn nod. Bryce was already there, pacing in a charcoal suit, flanked by Joan and a man I assumed was his lawyer. He looked at me once, I didn't look back. We walked in, signed our names, and took our seats. I looked down at Eli and whispered, "You still want to do this?" He nodded. "I'm ready." And for the first time in a long time, I believed we were going to be okay. Because this time, the truth wasn't just on paper. It had a voice, and it was about to be heard. The courtroom was colder than I expected. The walls were beige, the chairs stiff, and everything smelled faintly like paper and old coffee. Still, it was the quiet that I remember most. That thick waiting silence before a judge enters. The kind where you can hear the rustle of every paper and the beat of your own heart. Eli sat next to me at the petitioner's table, swinging his feet just above the floor, trying to look brave. He held his small notebook in his lap, the one where we had practiced his statement just in case. His red sneakers peeked out from under his pressed pants, and I could see how tightly he was clenching his fingers. Across the room, Bryce sat upright, perfectly rehearsed in his tailored suit. He glanced at Eli once but quickly looked away. Joan sat behind him, lips tight, eyes scanning the room like she was the one being judged. When the judge finally walked in, everyone rose. He looked down at the file before him, our case number, names, and the stack of documents we'd submitted over the last few. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. After the formalities, Bryce's lawyer stood to speak first. She was polished and confident, laying out a narrative I had heard 100 times. Mr. Carter seeks equal parenting time, emphasizing routine and emotional balance for the child. He has demonstrated consistent interest in Eli's well-being. Consistent interest? He hadn't called Eli on his birthday, hadn't asked about his allergies, didn't even know Eli still slept with his nightlight. I clenched my jaw and stayed silent. Then it was our turn. Denise stood with measured calm. "Your Honor, we are requesting primary physical and legal custody. We have submitted documented evidence showing concerning communication and behavior on Mr. Carter's part, including messages sent to the minor." The judge raised an eyebrow. "To the child?" Denise nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. And with the court's permission, Eli would like to speak." There was a pause, a real pause. The judge leaned slightly forward. "Are you sure, son?" Eli glanced up at me. I gave the smallest nod and he slowly stood. "I want to say something," he said, his voice soft but clear. The judge gestured him forward. "Come on up, Eli. Take your time." He walked slowly to the front of the courtroom, notebook in hand. His hands trembled, but he stood tall, taller than I'd ever seen him stand. He opened the notebook and took a breath. "My dad sent me some messages. I wasn't supposed to see them, but I did, and I think the judge should know." The room went still. Denise handed the bailiff the printed screenshots. The judge flipped through the pages as Eli read the words aloud from his copy. "Can't wait to be done with that brat so I can get my real life back," Eli read, his voice catching. He looked at the judge. "He was talking about me." A gasp came from somewhere in the gallery. Joan shifted in her seat, suddenly pale. Bryce's lawyer turned to him, her mouth slightly open. "And Bryce?" He just sat there, staring at the table, jaw clenched like it might break. Eli kept going. "He cries like a baby, just like his mom. Useless." He looked up again. "My mom doesn't cry all the time. She's strong. She helps me when I'm scared. And I'm not useless." Silence. The judge folded his hands. "Thank you, Eli. That was very brave. Is there anything else you want to tell me?" Eli hesitated, then said, "I don't want to live in a place where I feel like I'm a problem. I just want to feel safe." And that was it. He walked back to me and I pulled him close, whispering, "You did perfect." He nodded into my shoulder, holding on a little tighter than usual. The judge cleared his throat and looked directly at Bryce. "Mr. Carter," he said, his tone sharpened, "do you have any explanation for these messages?" Bryce started to speak, but his lawyer quickly interrupted, requesting a brief recess. The judge denied it. "I've seen enough," he said firmly. "The court's responsibility is to act in the child's best interest. And based on the documentation, testimony, and this child's incredible honesty, today I'm awarding full physical and legal custody to Miss Carter." I didn't cry, not there. I just closed my eyes and breathed. Bryce didn't argue. He just stared at the floor, cornered by his own words. Joan stood to leave before the hearing was even adjourned, her banana bread optimism gone. And Eli. He reached for my hand and smiled. "Can we get pancakes now?" he whispered. I laughed finally. "Absolutely." We didn't talk about the courtroom on the drive home. Eli rolled the window down and let the wind rush through his hair like nothing had just happened. Like he hadn't just exposed the darkest side of his father in front of a judge and a courtroom full of strangers. Like he hadn't just changed the course of both our lives. But that's how kids are. They're built to bounce back even when they shouldn't have to. We stopped at a small diner on the way home. Pancakes like I promised. He ordered his with whipped cream and chocolate chips. I got coffee and didn't touch it. I just watched him. Every little detail. His tired eyes, the way he used his fork like a spoon, how he laughed when the syrup bottles squeaked. For the first time in months, maybe longer, he looked peaceful. "I did okay?" he asked mid-bite. "You did better than okay," I said. "You told the truth. That's the bravest thing anyone can do." He smiled wide, mouthful of pancake, and went back to eating like he just won a trophy. And in a way he had. The final court documents came 2 weeks later. Full custody granted to me. Supervised visitation only for Bryce, pending a family therapist's evaluation and ongoing monitoring, which meant he wouldn't be seeing Eli for a long time, maybe not at all unless he made drastic changes. He didn't. Instead, Bryce disappeared from our lives almost overnight. No calls, no texts, no appeals. His lawyer dropped him. Joan never reached out. The last we heard, he'd moved in with someone new across the state and was starting fresh. I guess that's what cowards do, they run. At first, I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. I thought maybe he'd find a loophole or try to twist things again. But the silence held. And in that silence, something incredible started happening. Eli came back to life. He started drawing again. Not just little sketches, but full comic strips with bold colors and wild characters. He made me the hero in one. A cape-wearing mom who saved the day with waffles and truth. I hung it on the fridge like it belonged in a gallery. He began sleeping through the night. No more creeping into my bed at 2 a.m. with nightmares. He laughed more. He asked questions again about space and the ocean and whether dinosaurs had belly buttons. The sparkle was coming back. And me? I started breathing again, real full breaths. I took on new clients, worked better hours, and started putting money aside for things like soccer cleats and piano lessons, things I couldn't afford when every dollar went to legal fees and therapy. I joined a book club. Nothing dramatic, just women like me. Tired but healing, strong in ways we hadn't known before. People sometimes ask if I hate Bryce, if I'd take him back to court if he ever tried to show up again. The truth is, I don't hate him. I don't have space for that anymore. What I feel is sadness for the father Eli could have had and never did. For the man who could have been someone's safe place and chose control instead. For the boy inside him who probably never learned how to love without using it as leverage. But I don't carry his weight anymore. I stopped the day Eli stood up for himself and told the truth. I do still talk about that day in court, though not because it was dramatic or victorious, but because of what it meant. It meant Eli's voice mattered. It meant a child could be heard and believed, not just dismissed because he was young or small or told what to think. It meant the cycle stopped with us. And if there's one thing I'd tell anyone watching this, any mother who feels erased, any child who feels unseen, it's this. You are not powerless. Not when you have the truth. Not when you have love. And definitely not when you have courage. Bryce took the dog. He thought he was walking away with something valuable, something clean and obedient and easy. He left me the kid. And let me be clear, I got the better deal. Because my son is brave. He's honest. He's growing up knowing that love doesn't come with conditions, and that being kind is never a weakness. That courtroom didn't just change a custody agreement. It gave my son back his voice, and it gave me back my life. If this story moved you even just a little, please give this video a like. It helps more people find it, especially those who might be going through something similar and need to know they're not alone. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Maybe you've been through a custody battle. Maybe you were the kid in the middle. Or maybe you just want to send some love to Eli. Whatever it is, your voice matters here. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I share real stories that shine a light on resilience, family, and the quiet strength it takes to speak the truth, even when it's hard. Thanks for watching. Take care of yourself and take care of your